Joining me today is Miss Kim Kelley, who is the founder of Digital Defenders United. You can find her on Instagram. Digital Defenders United is an organization dedicated to protecting children and the innocent in the digital realm, providing awareness, accountability, and holistic solutions for digital safety to put an end to exploitation. And when Kim shares with you the horrifying statistics of exploitation, it is going to shake you and rattle you to your core. And before I turn it over to her, I want to tell you that on pornography websites like Pornhub, there are actually algorithms that detect even so much as a whisper of child sex abuse material or non consensual sexual contact, i.e., rape videos. However, when you look at Instagram, Snapchat, WhatsApp, and other platforms, we're talking about tens of millions of reports of CSAM, which is child sex abuse material. Kim, how is it possible that something like Pornhub has ironclad restrictions to detect all of this material, yet all of these mainstream platforms like Instagram, Snapchat, and WhatsApp have between 10 and 17 million reports annually of child sex abuse material? Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. I'm grateful for this real talk because this is obviously a problem. And there are a lot of layers of this problem that the public needs to, first of all, be aware of, and then also sift through what the real problems are and what the real solutions, therefore, are. So you said it, and let's start there. A big reason I'm focusing on digital safety in terms of public advocacy is because, one, there's a lot that people need to know there that's not okay. There's a lot I've seen while working undercover with law enforcement, pretending to be a child on the internet that is not okay. And in the digital realm, there are a lot of solvable problems. There is a measurable way we can impact this issue. So I love where you started because that's an issue I looked into very extensively. The issue of the accusations that the pornography industry is behind sex trafficking, and then comparing it to other mainstream media platforms. And my shock to find out that Meta is the number one offender of child sex abuse material per NCMEC's 2023 report. 17.8 billion reported instances of CSAM just on Facebook, followed by, I believe it was 11 or 15 million on Instagram, followed by Google, followed by WhatsApp, and then there was Twitter, TikTok, and Snapchat. So those are the top main offenders. But number one, why is nobody talking about them? Number two, if the public was aware how solvable these problems are, we could then define this issue as intentional. Because to your question, what's their excuse for not moderating the content on their platforms? If ALO, the company that owns Pornhub, has eradicated child sex abuse material, what's Google's excuse? Google, by the way, as the largest collection of pornography on the internet, free, available to everyone, zero age verification or blocks or limits, the largest collection where your children are most likely to find all types of not only adult content, but content you are not even allowed to search for, much less find results for on Pornhub. So what's with all the misdirection of energy and the false accusations, and where are the real solutions to these problems? Well, it starts by identifying what the real problems are.
So one might almost say that these high-level executives at these tech companies might, in fact, be complicit in avoiding the problem and allowing the perpetuation of this material to exist on their platforms. Because if the top four widely available social media sites are generating 50 million incidents annually of child sex abuse material, this is a horrific problem. And as you said last time on the show, the child sex trafficking industry in America generates $56 billion annually, which is more money than Costco and McDonald's generate combined. Okay? Combined. So, what do we do about this? And why is this not even really being widely discussed by political figures?
All great questions. I will unpack this in a manner that is rhetorical for the sake of helping people unpack this logic for themselves. Also, because my dark humor does not allow me to take any of this seriously. So when I laugh and smile about these things, for people who don't know me, I want them to understand where I'm coming from. Number one, I am a survivor of 20 years of cult abuse, including child trafficking. I was born and raised in an international religious cult that was about 25,000 children. Trafficking was one of the many forms of abuse. So this is a world that I know to my core. I have not only lived experience, but now I work undercover with law enforcement. I work with various tech giants and cybersecurity experts in the realm of solving problems to end child exploitation. I am uniquely positioned, and also it shouldn't have to be me out here doing what I do, but I've seen too much where I can't not do something about this. Now, when it comes to rhetorical questions, you asked, why is nobody talking about this? Let me give a little spoiler alert. I have this idea that if people became aware about how solvable these problems are, we could hold tech companies accountable, not in theory, because we've done enough with words, but we could actually affect their profits in a way that gets their attention and makes them care. See how I'm being sarcastic with the smile? It's because they should already be doing these things. If they wanted to, they would have already done these things. Pornhub has done these things. Google has no excuse not to do these things. All these companies we're mentioning, Meta, Google, Twitter, Snapchat, they all have a much larger budget, resources, and ability to solve these problems. So, said more specifically, they are intentionally profiting off the exploitation of children until they solve these problems. I also say that having done work undercover, pretending to be a child on the internet. So let me just paint this picture of the spectrum of intensity that is child exploitation, of all the nasty things we're talking about, trafficking, including various other forms of abuse. What children see on the internet is on a much lesser end of the spectrum than something as intense as child sex trafficking. However, just what I've seen in the 3 days, 2.5 days that I'm pretending to be a 12-year-old child on the internet would make seasoned law enforcement's stomach turn. It would make grown adults cry. And I want people to understand that children cannot unsee that type of content. So let me paint this picture. I'm simply posting a picture of a baby looking child's face with a name on a social media app that any child can download and that they use to interact with friends. These are not dating apps. These are not dark web apps. Within 10 seconds of me simply creating a profile on these apps, and yes, I have filmed this because it happened so quickly that it shocked even me, who's not only an extremely hardened individual to this topic, but I also have a marketing agency in my professional careers that I specialize in social media marketing. Never once ever has it happened to me as an adult or with any client's profile that I've ever set up, that within minutes of setting up a profile, we are inundated with people smattering our inbox. Never once has that happened, except for when I'm pretending to be a child on the internet and I post a picture of an innocent child. And within seconds, it is raining predators in my inbox with the most vile, disgusting things you can't imagine, the most descriptive things, in addition to the coded emojis, in addition to all the what we call harmful images. I've seen more adult male genitalia in the 3.5 days that I've pretended to be a child on the internet than I have in my entire adult life. So I could go on unpacking that story, real true story, something I've done in various cities and states across America within the last few years. Quick pause. Tell me to my face that those platforms are unaware that a child is being inundated with grown adults who are saying descriptive, violent, aggressive, inappropriate, and illegal things to this child and sending very illicit material to this child's inbox. Tell me to my face that the same technology that identifies the Facebook post or your TikTok account that they didn't like, or the thing you message to a friend that violates their community guidelines, that warning that we get when we say something they don't like, tell me to my face why that technology is not being used to protect children from the descriptive things these predators are saying and are so emboldened about. Tell me to my face why they're not blocked, why the child isn't blocked, why there is no intervention when I'm pretending to be a child on the internet. And thus, I submit my case that this is an intentional problem and that these companies are intentionally profiting off the exploitation of children because they make money off those users. Because if they block those users, their profits will be affected. So, how do we change this dynamic? Because unfortunately, there's no money in protecting children. How then do we make protecting children a profit-driven incentive for these tech companies? Because first we have to understand, it's not that they have to become aware of this issue. It's that they are intentionally ignoring this issue. With that understanding, we can then adjust our strategy to be effective.
So no one can say this is difficult because if a company as big as Pornhub implements something into their algorithm that instantly detects a whisper of this information, and they have a 100% successful eradication of all of this illegal content and all of the child sex abuse material and all of the rape videos and all of the bestiality, it's gone on Pornhub. The same algorithm and the same code could be implemented to Instagram and TikTok and Snapchat and WhatsApp and all these other ones as well. So they're choosing not to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If they wanted to, they would have. And again, my dark humor just does not allow me to take any of this seriously because it's such a ridiculous problem. Like, let me say this very clearly. Child sex abuse material has no reason, has no excuse to exist on the internet. I'm not talking about morally. We could all agree that it has no place there. I'm talking about logistically. There is no excuse for any platform in 2024 and 2025 and beyond to have child sex abuse material on their platform. Even though, let me be devil's advocate here, Google Images doesn't actually host the content. They're a collection. They index the content from other sites. Cool. They still have the ability to moderate illegal content on their collection of what they feature on their websites, on their platform. There is zero excuse. I have brought in multiple third-party experts and cybersecurity specialists and all these different things. But let me unpack this even further. Alo, the company that created this technology that has been implemented in Pornhub and their other porn sites, they are offering to license this technology to these other tech giants, meaning you don't even need to reinvent the wheel. Here you go. It's in a package with a bow. Or you could make your own. But the point is that here's the proven system. Please implement at least this. They're also making that technology available for free to law enforcement. They've partnered with Crime Stoppers Internationals and quite a few other NGOs and law enforcement agencies coming from the realm of identifying the unimaginable on the internet and then what it's like to then do something about it. So reporting and delivering that illegal content is a very archaic process that slows down, can take days or weeks. And when a child is being exploited, every second counts. So this technology they've made available for free not only helps streamline the entire process, but it brings it up to a much higher standard of detection and prevention. So again, guys, there's just no excuse. We can't play stupid hard enough to continue allowing these platforms to get away with some form of we didn't know or we can't level of excuse. That is absolutely unacceptable. And I believe if the public truly understood that, here's how we could affect them where it will hurt them to the point of making them care. Ready? We could hypothetically boycott the platforms that are intentionally, knowingly allowing child sex abuse material and other forms of child exploitation on their platforms. We could gravitate instead towards the platforms that have successfully eradicated it or are at least implementing the highest possible standard of security to prevent it. So hypothetically, if you knew that XYZ search engine had eradicated child sex abuse material, was monitoring and hashing every piece of content, and had implemented all these tech layers to make sure every piece of content posted or indexed on their site is consensual and legal. That's how low the standard is, by the way. If you knew that XYZ search engine had done that, but that Google still had not done it, would you or would you not boycott Google and only use XYZ search engine? I think that if even 20% of their profits were affected, they would start to pay attention.
So, unfortunately, we're talking to the majority of the population who is living on boxed wine and Xanax and microwavable dinners and sitting in front of a TV every night when they get home from their miserable jobs. So, these are the people that we need to shake really, really hard to wake them up and talk about how bad this truly is. So, last time you were on the show, you talked about the fact that the child sex trafficking industry in America generates $56 billion a year annually, which again is more money than Costco and McDonald's combined. Combined. Okay. So, number one, you talk about how could there be that much of an appetite for this kind of depravity in America? There's that issue. But here's where it got really scary for me when you said this. I said, Kim, is it the cartels doing this? And you said, no, they're doing some of it. But the majority of child sex trafficking is facilitated through social media by parents, friends, and family members of the child victims, which means that there are demonic parents and guardians and adults out there that are exploiting their children and selling them for sex online repeatedly, or they're having babies in a baby factory and selling the baby outright. Tell me
Oof.
about that.
Yes, I want to clarify a few things that, of course, the southern border and the cartels and all of that is a huge contributing factor to human trafficking in general and obviously crime in general in America. One of the issues there is that we don't have accurate data of how much, how many, when, etc. The other thing I should point out is that, okay, I'm a data expert. I'm a marketing professional. We live and die by data. That being said, any data expert, I would invite you to do some research about the stats on child exploitation and specifically trafficking in general, because they are severely lacking. They are overwhelmingly inaccurate. And also, did you know that our federal government stopped tracking violent crimes? I believe it was in 2019. That applies to all violent crimes, but we're also talking about domestic violence, child exploitation, and sex trafficking. It is being tracked completely differently per the FBI and the DOJ. So when I talk about statistics, just realize that we're barely scratching the tip of the iceberg, not only in my opinion, but because we know that also when data is collected, it's already outdated by the time it's published, especially in the realm of violent crime. And when we're talking about child trafficking being the fastest growing criminal enterprise on the planet. So the statistic of generating at least 50 to 80 billion dollars a year about at least 4 years ago, maybe 5 by now. Just imagine how much that has grown. And then realize that whatever they're basing that on, traffickers aren't filing taxes, so we don't know the real number even back then. So I just want people to understand for context. All of this is terrible, and the data is really just a touchstone, but it's disgusting. So we'll just stick to what's been proven for the sake of this conversation. Now, yes, familial sex trafficking is the number one reported form of sex trafficking in America. Families trafficking their own children. The internet has obviously contributed to a lot of that exposure, as well as the financial generation or trade of goods and services for exploitation. Is it primarily on the internet? We're not sure what's being traded in cash in back alleys. So you see how complex it is to really understand the issue, but I want people to understand the factual statistics that we're sticking to are not representative of the whole. And one of the biggest complexities of this whole issue is that it's such a complex problem with so many layers of the problem. It's not a one size fits all, both in terms of the problem and the solutions. So let's talk about familial sex trafficking and what that means. Now I'm going to talk about my lived experience for the sake of context here. Kids like me who were born and raised in an environment. Now, you called it a baby farm. We can call it various types of things. The point is that there are children who are born and raised in an environment where this is all they know, where they're told red is blue, and that's their entire upbringing and reality. There's also a, let's call it, spectrum of intensity of different ways and to varying degrees that children can be trafficked. For the sake of this conversation, we're also focusing on sex trafficking, even though there are multiple ways humans can be trafficked. Labor trafficking, domestic servitude, and a lot of other things are often part of the dynamic, as well as other forms of crime like drugs and other things that can be mixed in with terrible things. So, focusing just on child sex trafficking in the United States, familial trafficking is the #1 reported form. Talking about my experience, I was raised in an environment where mostly American children, tens of thousands of American children, were born into this international religious cult, brought all over the world. Trafficking was one of the many forms of abuse. People really hyperfixate on the sexual abuse, but not really accounting for the mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, all the other realms of being brainwashed every day of your life as a child and the impact that that has on children. Now then, I did spend 4 years of my childhood in the United States, and I want to talk about this part of that story for the sake of people's understanding that this can often hide in plain sight. And yes, it's happening in our country, and yes, people are truly unaware, and yes, awareness reduces the predator's ability to operate. Awareness makes it harder for bad guys to get away with doing bad things to children. So here's one of many stories from my childhood, focusing on the 4 years that I was in the United States, because for the most of the time, I was born in Brazil. I was raised mostly in Brazil and Mexico. So that being said, from the age of 10 to 14 years old, I was in Houston, Texas with my family. And every single week, I worked on the streets, in restaurants and shopping malls and grocery stores and people's houses and all kinds of famous landmarks in Houston, Texas. We performed for the Houston, Texas City Council. We were in the Astrodome in a skybox. Like, we were in all types of significant landmarks right in front of people's faces. In the 4 years that I was in public view as a obvious child, 10 to 14 years old, not once did a concerned citizen or law enforcement officer stop and ask if I was okay, or what am I doing on the streets, or why am I not in school, or where are my parents, why am I alone, what am I doing here? Not once. Have I eaten today? What's happening here? Not once did someone have the awareness to ask questions. Now, here's where it gets even more complex, because in my story, my parents were part of the evil. My parents actually worked themselves into a top-ranking leadership position in this cult. I say that with a lot of disdain, obviously, because you have to be the most evil and psychotic to earn a place of leadership in a cult. So you have to be pretty bad. They were some of the worst in terms of highest ranking leadership in the entire international network of this cult. That being said, hypothetically, if a law enforcement officer would have been alerted, would have asked me questions that would have resulted in them saying, you can't be out here working, you're a child, let's return you to your parents, they would have brought me back to my parents, which wouldn't have resulted in any form of rescue. However, it could have meant that I spent less time on the streets. But more importantly, it could have meant that around 10,000 other children could have spent less time on the streets in our childhood, maybe had some form of semblance of a childhood, maybe an education, medical care, other things I could go on. It could have resulted in a different quality of life. And I understand that strangers walking past me didn't know that. But what I'm calling the attention to is that I'm not asking anyone to be Rambo. I'm asking for them to have the awareness and the willingness to ask questions. So it's very difficult in the United States when we talk about rescuing children from trafficking, because you can't just go kick down doors and take children away, especially from their parents, even if the parents are the traffickers. Unfortunately, that would be called kidnapping. So in my situation, in those 4 years that my siblings and I were in Houston, Texas, which, by the way, is one of the epicenters of human trafficking in our nation, during those 4 years, strangers could have done a lot to help if they had had the awareness. Now, we could expand this conversation into acknowledging that there are a lot of laws and protections that don't exist that should protect children from those unique situations, while also acknowledging that I don't think you or I want to give the federal government more power to step in and tell parents how to raise their children or what to do or what they can't do. So you see how this issue becomes quite complex when we really unpack the layers. I think it's important for the public to understand some of the many layers because it's part of us tailoring our strategy to be effective in solving these problems.
So I have read cases that has resulted in busting specific rings where there are basically essentially brothels of children from the ages of 5 to 15 where a child could be raped by a grown man, 30 to 40 different men per day, every day, where they are forcibly drugged with heroin or Oxycontin or whatever drugs to keep them drugged. And they have a very low life expectancy. There have also been cases that have resulted in rings that have been busted with hundreds of terabytes of videos of grown men raping infants. So people need to take their fucking blinders off and realize that evil exists at a level that is incomprehensible to the average person that is drinking fucking boxed wine and sitting in front of their TV watching some stupid fucking show on Netflix every night. There is a whole other shadow society operating behind this veil of deception that is generating more money than Costco and McDonald's combined. And it is a monumental pandemic. This is the ultimate pandemic. And, you know, for people that know anything about the veteran suicide epidemic, we're losing 22 veterans every day to self inflicted gunshot wounds, overdoses, hangings, and other methods of suicide. So, on an annual basis, we're losing 6,000 men and women who have served our country every single year to suicide. It's a horrific epidemic. Then you get into child trafficking, and it's a level of evil and depravity that you hear these figures and you say, that can't be real. That
Right.
can't be real. There's no way a grown man with a heart and soul and morals who's a human being could possibly entertain doing that to a fucking child.
Right. In my opinion, you have to be both evil and psychotic in order to abuse a child. The other characteristic of a predator that I want people to understand is that 100% of the time, someone who would abuse a child is a very weak individual. I'm not saying that to be cool. I'm saying that to help people identify the characteristic as well as stop thinking, oh, big, scary bad guy. No, 100% of the time, you will never find a strong man or woman abusing a child. Never. Not going to happen. Now, the extent of the depravity, like I said, you have to be both evil and psychotic because, yes, it will never make sense. There's zero justification. We all understand that. But we need people to comprehend that people still do it. Just because you are not evil or psychotic does not mean we should wish away the people who are doing this to children on a daily basis. The other way
So,
I think that grown-ass adults are not allowed to stand in the corner being afraid of the dark. Children get to. We get that. We don't get to be afraid of this or use fear as an excuse to hold us back from getting involved. Yes, this is happening. How big, how many? I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but I'm saying 2 is too many. 100 are too many. 1,000, 100,000. Like, at what point are people going to be compelled enough to care? And rhetorically, at what point is our federal government going to care enough to be aware? You know, it kind of tickles me, but we do a lot of, you know, raising awareness, and we have Human Trafficking Awareness Month and Human Trafficking Awareness Day, and I think that's great. But sometimes the hashtags and wearing blue and the awareness, I feel like we're preaching to the choir, because at what point is the government aware enough, ready, to focus or even pretend like they're going to prioritize this issue. Now, let me unpack that real quick. As big of an issue as human trafficking is in the entire world, it is proven that the United States is the main problem. We're the number one source and destination and consumer. We're the highest ranking offenders of every type of related exploitation. Narrowing that down to children, we're definitely the largest epicenter of child sex trafficking in the entire world. Let's pretend it's only $50 billion still, like was confirmed about 4 years ago. Here's the rhetorical question. Why doesn't the federal government have a dedicated agency that is focused on combating human trafficking? Because they're doing a lot of hoopla pretending to care about, for example, the war on drugs, which I'm not saying is effective. I'm saying they're pretending to care. I'm saying politicians get a lot of support and vote. I'm saying they make a lot of sounds with their mouth about it. Why don't we see that same noise about children being trafficked in our country? So at what point does awareness matter? Like I said, awareness does make it harder for bad guys to get away with doing bad things. But at the same time, part of tailoring our strategy to be effective is comprehending the level of depravity and that there are people evil and psychotic enough to either turn a blind eye or be a part of it and or assist in allowing this to thrive. It's not that our federal government needs more awareness. It's that if they wanted to, they would.
So, to that point, Ted Gunderson, that was a former assistant director of the FBI, was very outspoken about this. And he wrote a book called The Franklin Cover Up. And this is when Bush Sr. was president. Ted Gunderson was doing speeches across the country, and he would pack an auditorium full of people, and a lot of them would be law enforcement. And this is before the internet. So Mr. Gunderson did not get a lot of publicity because you couldn't make anything go viral before the internet, obviously. And the Franklin cover up breaks down that there are sections of the FBI that were actually complicit in assisting trafficking groups in moving children across the country and utilizing organizations like Child Protective Services to not only get the children, but transport them to elite, high level, very rich groups that would abuse these children. And the FBI was basically the intermediary between CPS and this elite group of abusers. So, with that said, in my former life in real estate, which I took very seriously because, someone as a real estate broker, you have a fiduciary responsibility to your clients, but you also have morality involved. And so I have an app on my phone called Kids Live Safe. And what it allows you to do is pull up a map and you see red dots on these houses in a certain geographical area. When you click on a red dot, you will see the mugshot of a pedophile. You'll see the case number, and you will see a description of the crime committed against the child. When you look at this app in certain geographical areas of the country, it is littered with red dots. So if I would be in a certain neighborhood, especially a questionable part of California, I would always open this app before we would walk into a home, and I would show them the neighborhood. And if there was any red dots within a quarter mile of that home, I would click on the red dot and I would say, that individual is potentially one of your neighbors. And this individual, that was forced oral copulation of a child, forced sodomy of a child, repeated aggravated sexual assault or rape of a child, possession of God knows how much child sex abuse material on their laptop. And you say that there's a profile. I have seen thousands of these men, and they are middle-aged, overweight, homely, disgusting looking human beings with poor hygiene. They're unkept. They all have the same crazy fucking look in their eyes. I swear to God, it's like the profile, and they all fit the description. These are guys that could never get a date with a woman. These are guys that would never command respect of other men. These are guys that are fucking pathetic, waste of a human being who are taking out their insecurity, their self-hatred, their psychosis, their rage on our most innocent, and it is fucking despicable.
I absolutely agree with you. And I'm going to give people a little view. I'm looking here for a folder of content here. I'm going to give people a view of the type of predators I see online because, look, I agree with you, but just realize you're talking about the sex offender registry, people who have already been caught. I'm going to show you a glimpse of what I've seen pretending to be a child on the internet, working undercover in connection with law enforcement, just posting a picture on the internet. First things first, I want to show you the picture that I've used. For the camera, for anyone listening audibly, it is a picture of a child who, how old does that child look?
12.
No way that child could be older than 15, correct?
No way.
Not entrapping anybody here. That is the picture that I use. It is a
Now
picture of,
that's you, but that's an AI generated younger version of you, correct?
absolutely, it's a picture of my face that I've used an AI filter to make look around 12 years old. This was created, you see the date on this, March 16th, 2023. This was the app. This is me creating an account. Let me show you this in real time. This is a different picture. This is 11:36 a.m. creating an account. This was setting up the account. This was a real profile picture that I took. 12:50 on March 17th. This was the AI profile picture a couple minutes later, March 17th, 12:51. March 17th, 1 o'clock. These are the predators that are pouring into my DMs. Now I want to pause and let people look at this. These are the predators. Now you could say, I'm sure a lot of those pictures are catfishing. For example, that one looks like a celebrity, so they're obviously catfishing. But look at some of these faces. Not all of these men look necessarily like the trench coat predators you might expect. Some of them look rather normal. You said, these are men that can't get a date with a woman. I think some of these men could, if they weren't so disgusting, get a date with a grown-ass woman. I want people to know that those are the message requests they are sending to a child. This is me doing nothing to get attention. This is not me, live streaming, commenting, friend requesting anybody at all. This is what comes pouring into the DMs of a child. Now, once again, you can see the profile picture that I'm using. It's literally that picture. I have so many of these things just pouring into my DMs with the most vile descriptive things that children cannot unsee. But I also want people to realize that every time we do this is in real time. You can see people, new message requests coming into the inbox. Everything ranging from, hey, baby, you're so cute, to very prolific, descriptive things that should not be allowed to be said. By the way, one of the qualifications for getting these people arrested is that we have to tell them our age in writing. So just in case anyone, for the avoidance of doubt, in case that picture somehow skipped the algorithm there, I am telling them I am turning 13 next week. I'm baking cookies with my grandmother. I'm 12 years old. Is that okay with you? I am telling them my age in writing. So obviously we have zero sympathy for these predators because there's no form of entrapment happening here, but I'm calling out the tech companies that are intentionally allowing this to continue. I want people to understand that when we set this up around the United States, we use a geo-targeting filter to make sure that these are people within about a 60-mile radius of whatever small city town we're in America. So we're not even getting like the bots or the overseas people that are coming in being weirdos. This is in your community. And when I show this to law enforcement, this is your community. These hundreds of predators that have flooded into my inbox in only 3 days, these are all in your community. This is what children in your community can't unsee.
I would bet you that every single one of those pieces of shit has illegal child porn on their fucking computer at home.
Absolutely. I would like people to know, for the record, in addition to all the disgusting things they say and the images and videos that they've just flooded who they think is a child with of their adult male genitalia, as a child on the internet, I have been sent child pornography by a predator who was grooming me with all kinds of screenshots of pornography. Realize he's not sending me links to a porn site. They're sending me screenshots on their phone. So, we can unpack this further, but when band-aid laws like age verification laws think they're protecting children, that's a bigger subject to explain how that's not effective. But my point is that I'm getting sent images and screenshots from existing content that is on their phone.
When I was a real estate broker, I think I probably talked 40 different clients out of buying what they thought was their dream home because there was a fucking red dot on Kids Live Safe across the street. I said, listen, I'd love to make a commission check on this sale because it'd be a lot of money for me. But morally, I have to tell you this. There is no fucking way I could sell you this home knowing you have children and this fucking guy lives across the street from you. And guess what? They said, we respect you so much. Please tell us where we should live. And I said, why don't you come up to my neck of the woods? You're going to pay more money, but let me tell you, around my fucking area, there's a radius of a quarter mile where there's nothing. Nothing. And I live by a school, so that helps too, because there's a federal law because of Megan's law that you can't have a fucking pedophile within 1,000 yards of a school, which is helpful.
Right. I have this idea that in my lifetime, not only will we end child sex abuse material within the next few years, we could do it within a few weeks, but I'm allowing for a few years, up to 5, in fact, because our federal government likes to move slow and be ineffective. But here's where I'm going with this. In addition to eradicating child sex abuse material from the internet, we will turn our culture into one that is aggressively, relentlessly hunting down predators. And predators will know that because they know right now that they can get away with stalking and harassing a child on the internet on these apps without being blocked, without any type of repercussion or limit.
Because if they get caught, they get a fucking ankle monitor and they get to go home. That's what they get. And so they're not scared. Now, if there
Exactly.
were public executions, guarantee you there'd be a fucking major decrease in these crimes pretty quick because these guys are fucking pussies. These guys couldn't defend themselves against a grown man who knows how to fight. These are weak, scared individuals that prey on children because they're fucking despicable and pathetic. So if they had the fear of God put in them, they're like, oh shit, if I get caught doing this, I'm gonna get, fucking hung on the gallows on the live stream and everyone's going to see me die, well, I better not do this.
Ethically, absolutely. I truly believe that if we had harsher punishments and sentences for these people, call it a zero tolerance policy, but very harsh punishments, including dismembering the parts of them that would offend a child. I absolutely agree that uh, it would lessen the amount of bad guys doing bad things. Like again, when we talk about effective solutions, the reason I harp on that is because there are well-meaning people with the misconception that if we implement a new law or bill making what's already illegal more illegal, that it would lessen that thing. Or it'd be kind of like saying, hey, we're going to make a bill saying that crime is illegal. Yay, we're protecting children. Like it's criminals don't follow the law. It's already an illegal act. Human trafficking is already illegal. More bills and band-aids don't make it better, right? We need to tailor our strategy to be effective. So what does that mean? I believe that not only, yes, I do think we need more policies to protect children, specifically, for example, children born into cults. Like, wait a minute, we don't have protections for that. We need better laws and legislation to protect survivors because we don't have safe place to put children who have been rescued from trafficking. We don't have trauma-informed care. We don't have institutions, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot to be said there. We need better law enforcement and prevention and all that to be said. I also think that a major way we can turn this tide is when our communities become intolerant to these predators, when the community is willing to rally around children's safety and be relentless and outspoken about being intolerant of predators. I'm talking about within neighborhoods, within churches and schools and country clubs and dad groups and all the things. We need communities to step in and step up to protect children and to make sure that predators know they are not welcome there and they will never be tolerated. We're not going to make pretty spaces for them or call them pretty names. We are going to be aggressively intolerant of them.
So I just want to clarify that this is not me promoting violence on the podcast, but I'm just observing what's going on in society. And I do follow quite a few people that actually hunt down these these pedophiles, and they're like gutter level pedophiles
Right.
that you would expect. But you're seeing a reemergence of vigilante justice because there are plenty of videos on the internet of these guys that do what you do and they pretend they're a kid and they're fishing for these guys and they get one and they set a meetup and they go with cameras and they beat the living shit out of these guys.
Absolutely.
Now
But
I'm not condoning it. I'm just saying I like it.
I agree that I think I like it as well. And let's also say this. So, a lot of people, to my earlier analogy of grown ass adults who are standing in the corner being afraid of the dark, it's hilarious, truly hilarious to me how many grown ass, big, tough looking men will look me in the face and be like, wow, I can't believe you do this. This must be so scary. But what if they come after you? Oh no, but what if? And I'm like, first of all, what? Like, okay, darkness is scary, so we should just not protect children from it. Like, first of all, I don't compute the premise here, but also it's ironic, right? That grown ass men say that to my face because if little old me can be out here with this little light of mine eradicating darkness, no one has an excuse. But specifically, there are multiple ways to do this correctly. Now, let me say this. If I was a grown ass man who was trained to fight, and whether or not I was a dad, whether or not whatever, I would absolutely be willing to be aggressive with anyone who preys on children in my community. Absolutely. Not condoning violence, but Jesus did recommend the millstone, and I'm with Jesus on that one. Okay.
Well,
Now
and
that
you're also someone who knows how to handle a firearm. You hang out with former special forces guys. You go to this ranch where you do tactical training, close quarters combat, long range shooting. I mean, you're hanging around high level operators that are in this fight with you, which I think is fucking wonderful. I'd love to hear about that.
I'd love to tell you about that. Yeah, so that's where I was going is that petite little smiley me, right? Like I'm not out here trying to be Rambo. However, there's a lot that I can do to be helpful. It's actually unique that um for a long time I didn't accept why me because I wanted everyone else to do it, but I didn't want it to be me. I don't want it to be on camera, etc. There's a lot to be said for my understanding of this world, my fearlessness in facing this world, and even just the ability to pretend to be a little girl and deal with these predators. I'm talking about mentally as an adult, deal with these predators that children face, because I'm telling you, trained adults have a very difficult time like dealing with what it's like to hunt these predators. I really enjoy taking them down. And to your point, I work with the trained good guys who are, in law enforcement that can make the arrests, in government agencies and, contractors in the different realms of heroes there, blurry faced dudes, if you will, who like to make sure that the innocents are protected at all costs. So again, I'm using myself as an example here that if little old me can be out here doing this, there are a lot of ways that every single person can help. No matter if you're trained or, licensed or whatever it is for it. I know that there are people much better positioned and qualified to be doing what I do. And I hope that they too will step up to help because we really need their help. What I think is unacceptable is for some of us to choose not to do something. And I am saying that's a choice to do something as well as doing nothing. In this day and age, with the size of problem that this is, with the amount of children that need help, with the amount of children we could prevent from needing help, we have no excuse not to do something to be
And
part of.
Kim, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're losing approximately 460,000 children in this country annually. They go missing.
That's what's reported that goes missing. Emphasis on that's what's reported. That's also, not including the undocumented who come over, et cetera, et cetera. Yes.
And
But
that's also not including baby farms where the babies have no fucking birth certificate.
that's not including kids like me who are born and raised in environments where they're never reported, never rescued, never part of the statistics. Like I
Oh,
know
and side note, real quick, Oprah Winfrey was friends with John of God in South America, who had one of these fucking cults where he had female prisoners that he kept impregnating over and over and over and over and was selling the fucking babies into these trafficking organizations. That's Oprah Winfrey's friend, ladies and gentlemen.
there's a lot of questionable ties to a lot of things. So let's talk about cults. And I do want to talk about the good guys I work with at the ranch because we're
Let's
doing a
get
lot.
into that first because I want to hear about some of the operations you've been on with these guys. How that all goes down. How do you catfish these guys? How do you set them up and how do you bust them?
Well, I'll be as clear as I can, but of course, there's a lot that I won't talk about because it's not public, because we're
Understood.
it's called OPSEC, operational security.
Sure.
Also because I'm there's a lot of heroes I can talk about, and so many that the public will never hear about. And I just want to highlight that like I'm never going to take credit for what these guys do, and I want the world to know that there are heroes in the shadows doing amazing things that again the public will never know about. I want to tell you guys about something that has lit up my soul in the last year. This was before the election. Like, just real quick, for anyone who thinks this is like a red versus blue problem, so much bigger than that. It's not about, everything is backwards from what you've heard. So, like, just let's not even assume we're talking about politics and any of these things. But just know that this happened long before the election in 2024. Something I've been calling out for years. Actually, let me talk about two specific things that happened in 2024. Something I've been calling out for years is that we don't have a federal agency that's dedicated to combating human trafficking, and that's ridiculous. That's not acceptable, etc. I even joke about it, because like dark humor joke about how like just we care about everything but, right? And that politicians won't even make sounds with their mouth about it. The other thing I was calling out for years, I told you I was in Houston, Texas for 4 years of my childhood, and that it's the epicenter of human trafficking, one of the top. Harris County, Houston, Texas, was also not prosecuting child traffickers. They had this massive problem. There are growing problems. There's a lot of different dynamics in Houston. That being said, children were being picked up off the streets and then being charged with prostitution, while traffickers were being returned to the streets and let loose because, oopsie, you bailed out. That's fine. Goodbye. Okay, so I was calling out the fact that the district attorney of Harris County was not prosecuting child traffickers. Let's talk about that one first. Every organization, including the really big ones with all the special creds, told me they couldn't get to the district attorney of Harris County. Couldn't, tried, failed. Okay. Little old me with my smiley face made some connections and was invited into one of these private events because the district attorney at that time was going for re-election. Here's where my marketing brain turns on and pops in. Ready? And here's where my sarcastic sense of humor, like if I have to smile and wave and play dumb until these solutions are implemented, watch me, right? Talked to the district attorney, and as I knew, she was running for re-election, and I was like, hey, it would be, talked about all the issues here, how I protect children, women's rights, children's rights, all the words they need to hear, but all the truth is just, putting it into a pretty package for them and then saying, you care about this issue, correct? Yes. Okay. What have been some of the obstacles that have prevented you from being able to prosecute traffickers? So I did get some real answers, like, okay, well, I'm not the investigator. I need to, okay, who do I need to talk to, et cetera, et cetera. But here's where I went with this. The point was that I was like, if you can say on video that you will prosecute child traffickers, I think Houston needs to know that. They need to know who to vote for, specifically because your opponent never talks about this. So we got her to say some words on video, right? That sounds easy. Wasn't easy, but my point is that those are just making some sounds with your mouth. However, fast forward to now, we're getting prosecutions in Harris County, and they are calling it child sex trafficking. They are doing time behind bars. Prosecutions matter for obvious reasons, but more generally, they matter because without prosecutions, law enforcement won't take it seriously. If they go through all this work of investigating and surveillance to get the bad guy, but then the bad guy doesn't get convicted, then it's basically a waste of time and sort of like a stain on their track record.
Quick
So,
question for you.
was that
Is this the same district attorney of Harris County that decided to be more aggressive with this, or is this a different district attorney that implemented these prosecutions?
So this one, Kim Ogg was the one that I spoke to and who said that on camera. Now, she did not get reelected. So what happened though is that it set certain things in motion that basically avoided how do I say this, helped put focus on it, helped authorize the people who needed to step up in different realms. So like I said, it's not just the district attorney, right? It's also the investigators, it's the process, like it's all the different layers of law enforcement, investigation, surveillance, etc. But when the leadership level essentially authorizes something, then the people beneath it can be moved into action in a more effective way. So to answer your question, she's no longer the district attorney. However, it set things in motion to where whoever the current district attorney is, they are more focused on it because of the amount of cases being brought to them, the amount of focus from law enforcement. I'm talking about the men and women on the front lines who have always wanted this to happen and who were blocked from being allowed to look into this, investigate, and bring bad guys to justice.
When you say something like this to a guy like me that has done hundreds, if not thousands of hours of research regarding this, trying to understand like how high up the echelon, the ladder does this go? And when you read the Franklin cover up, it goes to the top. Like, for example, the $65,000 worth of hot dogs that were delivered to Obama at the White House at 1:30 in the morning, stuff like that. And then you look into the different code words that pedophiles use, like hot dog or pasta or all these fucking pedophile words. Anyway, when you say to me, oh, well, the district attorney is not prosecuting, or this politician isn't talking about it, or, this politician wouldn't return our calls, and, or this politician said it's just not a priority. In my mind, I say they're fucking involved. They're fucking complicit. They're being paid off by one of these trafficking groups, or they're fucking partaking in this shit, or they got them on video doing something to a kid and they're being blackmailed. And I think that's how politics is really ran.
Right. I think in a nutshell, if you're turning a blind eye, you're still part of the problem. You're still guilty as if you were doing the actual act. So whatever level of, blackmail, corruption, deceits happening here, like, oh, but they tried, oh, but it was too scary for them to do. I think they're just as guilty. That applies across
But
the board.
what father or mother in politics, if they have a family and they have their own children, and someone like you comes to them and says, "Look at how big of a problem this is in your jurisdiction, in your region," and they say, "Oh, well, we're fucking busy. We're too busy." Like, how could a mother or father not want to run at this problem full speed ahead and run through that brick wall and implement all of these safeguards? They have the
Right.
power to do so. Like, what would be the motivation to avoid getting involved?
Right. It's a rhetorical question, unfortunately. And I think the answer to all my rhetorical questions in a nutshell, this is the most profitable criminal enterprise on the
So
planet.
they're getting fucking paid off to turn a blind
Whatever
eye.
degree that makes them culpable. I said this to that district attorney's face and to many other politicians' faces. This is where my smiley petite female stuff comes in because I can say whatever I want. And because I don't work for the federal government and they work for me, right? I am completely fearless when it comes to this. I also have a real sarcastic sense of humor because I can't take this seriously. Here's what I've said. I said, out of the pie chart of all the ways people make money off corruption, this one, the sliver right here of selling children, we're just not going to do this one. This one's, the rest is not my battle. And I stand there and let the awkward silence set in so that they understand what the fuck we're talking about right now. Because yes, I'm aware there's a lot of other bad things and lots of other forms of corruption. This, whatever size sliver it is of selling children, is the one we're just not going to do. Okay. Over our dead bodies, will we allow that to continue? And yes, we will call out the people who are too afraid or who want to make excuses for why they can't do something about it. Realize too that when we talk about barely scratching the tip of the iceberg, it's so much bigger and it's so much more intentional that people realize. Let me tell you another story. I was in Tennessee. I was at the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations. And I was talking to the head of the criminal investigations department, who also introduced me to the head of the anti-human trafficking department. And speaking to them, I was obviously asking questions about human trafficking, specifically child trafficking in the state of Tennessee. I was told in a nutshell, and I'm paraphrasing here, that while they do genuinely care, I spoke to these agents like, let me just make this clear. When we're talking about the corruption from the leadership, it's top down. Every person I've spoken to on the front lines cares too much, wish they could, and will even spend their own time and money, their precious day off and their own money, to go rescue children, to do what they couldn't do during their work hours, and or go to seminars and get training and get resources because they're not given those things. So I'm never talking about the men and women on the front lines. I'm talking about leadership. That being said, what I was told is that while they want to focus on combating child trafficking, often they are told to go focus on XYZ migrant prostitution ring and bring those guys down because those numbers make them look good. And while that's not great, that's also, they are completely aware that that's not the issue. Like, nobody's a fan of that, but also that's like not that's not what anybody wants to prioritize, especially knowing the actual issues. Now you can look at TBI.gov's website. They talk about how bad child sex trafficking is. You can see little pie charts and pretty graphs about how much it's grown. So when their leadership is telling them, don't look at that, look over here, unfortunately, that's a big part of the problem.
So I heard that the Super Bowl is the most profitable weekend of the year in child sex trafficking.
I mean, again, I think data is so hard to verify because no one knows the real numbers. I don't disagree, but I want to clarify for people who think, how could football contribute? Okay, it's not that football, the NFL, the Super Bowl specifically. It's that the Super Bowl is the largest event in America. Okay, so large events bring people who want to party. Now, if you're selling snow cones, if you sell snow cones in the city during the Super Bowl, you will sell more snow cones during Super Bowl week. Okay, so
Right.
the scale of everything increases during those big events. Those big events attract people who like to party. There's going to be a portion of those people that are sick, pathetic, weak motherfuckers who want to do bad things to children. So that being said, yes, large events attract a lot of people who want to party. Supply meets demand. So when big events come into any city, traffickers know to bring the supply for that demand.
Mm-hmm. So let's get into the ranch and the fun stuff that you do with the former special operators.
Awesome. Well, first of all, the ranch, it's ranchtx.org for anyone who wants to look it up. It's a government training facility. It actually used to be a Blackwater site. So that place has a lot of history there. The owner is a good friend of mine. They do a lot of law enforcement training, all the different military agencies, branches, federal government, like all the blurry face dudes, all the legends train there. Okay. So it's an incredible place. It's a 300-acre, place it's a tactical training paradise. Okay. Largest commercial live fire shoot house in the nation, et cetera, et cetera. Super fun place. But also, we also do civilian training there. So if you're an American citizen, you can sign up for classes there, which is really cool. And I highly recommend people increase their survivability by learning these tactical training techniques and, how to handle a firearm, how to drive correctly, how to avoid, bad things happening and all that. Now, that being said, I've been going down there for a few years now. I recently officially started working with them. Really good people, like I said, just some of the best salt of the earth type human beings. But every time I've been there, I've met different people who are our nation's protectors and heroes to varying degrees, and all of them care relentlessly about protecting children. So some of them have already either tasted, the realm of protecting children, rescuing children to varying degrees. Others have not confronted it directly, but ask me how they can help and what they can do. All these protectors would absolutely do this in their free time, and many of them do. So, like I said, there's a lot of things I won't talk about only because we're not trying to reveal the details of these operations. But I do want to say something loosely that has lit up my soul. Like I said, I was calling out the fact that there's no federal agency dedicated to combating human trafficking. Through some people that I met at the ranch who were compelled by me making sounds with my mouth on the internet, as well as having some very passionate fireside chats with them about the reality of this. The U.S. Marshal Service in Texas has been doing incredible things to protect children, things that are not public, as well as some things that have made some headlines, but not enough. They have found, let's call it a loophole, okay? Because the U.S. Marshal Service is a federal law enforcement. They're not a federal agency, but they are a federal law enforcement that work in conjunction with local law enforcement. So local cops who know the streets will work with the federal marshals. So they have federal jurisdiction. I can unpack why federal matters, but it's necessary due to the nature of trafficking. They move around a lot. So if you're just in one jurisdiction or one, county and they move outside of it as a local cop, now you can't do anything about it. So federal jurisdiction matters. That being said, they found, let's call it a loophole, to create not only an investigation branch and a task force, specifically a task force that is focused on rescuing children from trafficking.
Beautiful.
And taking down traffickers and predators. Now, in the last several months, they have rescued hundreds of children
Beautiful.
from trafficking.
And now when they go make a rescue, like what's the average amount of and is it like a situation like a house where they're like keeping the kids prisoner, or how does this all work?
It can be all kinds. So just realize that you can't control how many children you're going to find or see or whatever. Obviously, they do a lot of surveillance before they take any action. It's not just like this run and gun type thing.
Mm.
Um, I know that there are strategies in place to try to ensure that the bad guys are captured and brought down away from the children. So if they can
Mm.
avoid like making a raid into the house where these kids are to further, traumatize them, then they try to
Sure.
put them in other places or like on the streets or grocery stores or gas stations or wherever they may encounter them. So there's a lot of ways this can look. Yes, some children are brought over the border. Yes, some children are being trafficked by their family. Some children were runaways and reported missing, who are truly runaways that got sort of groomed into this, caught up in
Mm.
this, even kidnapped on the streets, etc.
Mm. Mm.
So there's a lot of ways this can happen. Recently, a 5-month-old baby was rescued.
How are these guys not executed like with no fucking appeals? Like, how do you ever consider letting one of these fucking demons back out into the general population of society after they cross that line? I don't understand.
I too I am not in that position and I agree with you. Now, that being said, that's why help from the leadership on the top, like them making the words or signing the papers that allow the good guys to do a good job on the front
Mm.
lines really matters. I will also say that there's often more justice in jails and prisons for these people who hurt children than in our legal system. I also know for a fact that while law enforcement has to abide by very specific guidelines, every single one that I've talked to in this realm are severely against any person who would hurt a child. Like the zero tolerance policy is quite intact. So I know they do what they can and in creative ways sometimes let these people know. Sometimes it's about sending a message to the network. So like you said, why can't we just take them down immediately and not even waste American tax dollars? I'm paraphrasing for you here, but like, why should we even pay for them to be housed and fed in a prison? I agree with you.
Well,
However,
not only that, they put them in a fucking separate part of the prison. Like they're with all the mental patients. It's the pedophiles and the fucking psychos are on the East Wing or whatever. And like then there's Gen Pop. And if Gen Pop gets their hands on one of these fucking pedophiles, they're going to be raped 30 times in one day and then have their fucking neck broken or thrown off the third floor or shanked. Like they will fuck them up,
right,
which is great. I mean, I'm not into gay sex, but that's fucking great that it's happening to them.
right. Again, I've looked at and debated this topic from all the angles with politicians, with religious people, with every realm of human that you can imagine, and I've heard all the excuses of all the things. Now, not a lot of people have the courage to really defend this to my face, at least. But when you do unpack the concept, the position that some people hold of, I've heard from Christians, oh, but we shouldn't judge and only God can judge and you shouldn't be so, violent, aggressive, something like that. Let's
Shut the
let's
fuck
let's
up.
let's screech to a halt real quick, okay? Because here's my dark humor ready. I was born and raised in a religious cult. It was a Christian cult. I was raised on the Bible. I can sing the Bible to you in 3 languages. So let's go, okay? There were 2 times in the Bible that Jesus was really fucking gangster. One of them was the one time he ever went to church as an adult and he flipped tables and kicked ass, and that was pretty cool. The second time was when he was talking to a bunch of people on a mountain, and children were trying to get through the crowd. They wouldn't let them through, and he said, "Let the children come unto me." So in context here, we're definitely talking about children because some church people like to think otherwise. We're talking about children in this story that you can read. It's mentioned and repeated 3 times in the New Testament. Y'all can look that up. That being said, Jesus said, "Let the children come unto me." And then he said, "It would be better for you to put a millstone around your neck and to be drowned in the bottom of the sea than for you to offend one of these little ones." I find that very significant because Jesus was very peace and love in every other thing he said, except for the one time that he damned someone to hell. The one time was to the church leadership of his day. That was the one time he ever mentioned condemning someone to hell. Anyway, he was peace and love in every other aspect, but he did not play when it came to offending a child. So, to the religious people with a religious perspective, I'm not here to take that from you. I'm here to use that as a basis for my logic here because I'm 100% with Jesus on that one. Jesus did not talk about forgiveness or even dialogue. He went straight to a very specific way to die. He literally was that day's version of, "Don't let me catch you offending a child. It would be better for you to go peel your face off than for me to catch you offending a child." He used that word. not something more specific like violating or defile or worse. Offend is pretty
It is an
broad.
offense. It is the most grave
Absolutely.
offense.
But the word offend is it's a very broad word. It's a very general term. It's not something very specifically aggressively violent. So my point is specifically talking to anyone who wants to call them pretty names or thinks we should make space for them in society or wants to use the biblical like we should not judge people and forgiveness, etc. That's not what Jesus said to do. So if you want to follow the teachings of Jesus Christ, it includes, but is not limited to the millstone around your neck and being drowned in the bottom of the sea if you offend a child.
Oh, well, guess what else he said in John 14:12? You will do all these works I have done and more. So your Savior is basically giving you permission to be Christ-like and do all the works he has done because you have that innate ability within you that is most likely dormant in most humans, but you can do more. So it's time for everyone to step up to the plate and read John 14:12 and realize you have been given permission to be your own savior and a savior to your family, your children, your friends, your neighbors, your community, the internet. You know, get rid of your fucking boxed wine. Stop taking your fucking Prozac and your Xanax. Lift some heavy weights. Eat some grass-fed beef. Be a fucking man and be a shepherd of these kids.
Absolutely agreed. Absolutely. So, I was talking about the ranch and it's like my second home because I'm there a lot, but also we're talking about the protectors and the people that we need to see more of in our societies. These are people that are not only tactically trained for it, there are people that are unafraid to speak up about it. So let's call them old school if you want. But the point is that we don't get embarrassed to talk about protecting children or what it's like to take down someone who thinks it's okay to harm children, make examples out of them, even in their communities. This even goes all the way down to, cops that have jurisdiction in their area, things that the public might find unconventional. And I'm not talking about working outside the scope of what's legal. I'm talking about being willing to step up and be protectors. Because a lot of people, call it what you will, are too cowardly to step in, or they use fear as an excuse. So, to whatever degree, I'm calling that out as not okay. And I also want people to know that these real modern day heroes exist and that there's a lot of things that we, the people, can do, even though our federal government has not specifically chosen this area of focus. Okay, so I don't care who's president or who's doing what on the screens that you're watching. All of us can do so much within our communities. We can do so much to impact our law enforcement, our district attorney, our mayor, whatever the leadership is in your city or your town. If you care about protecting children, why haven't you talked to them? Why haven't you gone to them, met them, asked who's in charge of this and what their plan is to solve this? A question I ask every politician or someone who's running for like sheriff or whatever it is to whatever degree. I say, cool, nice to meet you. What's your plan to combat child trafficking? Because the responses I've gotten have ranged from like deer in the headlights, total look of confusion, which allows for conversation about, well, we should focus on this, to some form of awkward stutter where I can tell they really don't want to talk about it. And that's where we start talking about it even louder. Because we should really find out who's running our towns and who's responsible for what. But more importantly, I want to see people move beyond the emotional response of awareness into the next step, which is action. And I want people to know that no matter who you are or what you're not positioned to do, you are absolutely positioned to hold people accountable, to call out corruption, to make sure that they know that not only are we watching them and we're voting accordingly, but that we will hold their feet to the fire. We will make sure the community is aware if they are not making the effort that they should be making to protect children, if they're looking the other way, if they're letting traffickers loose, if they're charging these child victims as prostitutes, if they're not providing safe places for these children who are rescued. We want them to know that we, the people, are watching and that we will hold them accountable. So,
Kim, you know what's fucking scary, real quick, and I apologize for cutting you off, but when you look at all the money that these fucking tech billionaires have, like all the money exists to solve this problem. Like there are nurses and Reiki masters and holistic wellness coaches and wonderful women that are filled with unconditional love that could be running an organization where there could be dormitories or fucking apartment buildings or like these safe areas where these kids could be rescued and taken to start a lifelong healing process.
Absolutely. Again, when I talk about solvable problems, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's doable. I'm also saying we have no excuse not to do something. So, to your point, I'm not even talking about all the trillions of dollars of misappropriated and unaccounted for money that our government has dwindled away. I'm talking about how come we have so many centers for animals, and I'm a huge animal lover and I'm super glad we have those. How come we don't have safe places for children? How come we're not even pretending to care about this? How come this isn't being focused on? How is this acceptable? I think a lot of this thrives because people are unaware. So, again, that's where awareness comes in. Because if we were making sure that the politicians we vote for have this area of focus on their little list of things they're trying to get our votes for, they could modify that. Now, again, I want us to move beyond making sounds with our mouth. But right now, we are in the era where our elected officials are not even making sounds with their mouth, like on their websites where they're put their topics. Did you guys see child trafficking being the highlight of any presidential candidate, of any politics? Like, are we even seeing the words or the sounds with our mouths? No.
Three
So,
words: Epstein, flight log.
oof, that's a lot of hoopla right now, right? So there's this whole this administration is going to release the flight logs and
Oh,
something.
but we're going to do it in phases because it's a movie. Give me a fucking break. You guys have the names. All of
Kelley.
us on the internet have had the names for 2, 3 years already. And now we're like, oh, well, here's phase one for the sheeple. Phase
Uh,
one.
right, exactly. You've mentioned the Franklin scandal a lot, and I want to direct people to Nick Bryant. He's an investigative journalist, and he's the one that uncovered the Franklin scandal and reported on it, which was like a very courageous act to do back in the day and brought obviously a lot of scrutiny on him. He's also the one that covered the Epstein situation. So it's a very same pattern as you can imagine. He calls the Franklin scandal sort of like the Epstein point, part one, if you will. Same, but different, but the exact same patterns and involving elected leaders and politicians and blackmail and cover ups and all the different levels of corruption. Now, here's my point. Nick Bryant released the Black Book. You can Google Epstein Black Book. He released that, I want to say it was 2016, but it was over 10 years ago. Released with names. Now, the contact information was redacted, but the names were on that list. Google it. What the current administration, quote unquote, released had less information than what Nick Bryant released over 10 years ago. I just want to call into question everybody's logic who's like, oh, the government's corrupt, but this one's coming to save us. So now I can just stay here on my couch while this guy that I voted for is going to just like solve all these problems that I've been reading about for years now. Unfortunately, friends, if they wanted to, they could have last time. I'm going to say it, if this administration wanted to properly handle the Epstein situation, they would have when they were in power, when it was happening the first time. Who was the administration in power when this Epstein situation got the media attention?
So tell me where to go to find the black book.
Just Google Epstein Black Book. So Epstein Justice is Nick Bryant's website. It's great
Okay.
for all kinds of resource. Just do a little Google search. Epstein Black Book. I'm even being
Epstein,
facetious.
black book, Nick Bryant.
Yeah. So scroll down. All right, right there. Boom play music. There's gonna be a few different results, but I just want to show people your screen on Google. Oh, that's a podcast. My bad.
So
Go back.
that's the Sean Ryan
Online.
show. The latest tranche of Epstein documents right here.
It might be. I honestly Googled this a few months ago and I wonder if the results have changed. I have screenshots of it and I actually downloaded it.
Oh,
Oh, this
here's the
yeah.
PDF. So let me stop the share real quick and I'll download the PDF and then I'll open it.
It's literally a bunch of alphabetically organized names, including the Trump's names. Absolutely. Like, guys, I'm not political. Again, this
943 pages.
this is
Oh my God.
yeah, with
What
actual
is
names. With actual names. So this current smoke show is like blah blah blah. We're gonna make it a reality show, right? Ridiculous. I think this might be the dissertation.
okay?
But there's an actual it's got like it's a like a scanned copy of the black book that I believe the housekeeper had, where it has different names and their contact information, and some names are circled, including the Trump's name.
Okay.
So
So
what I
maybe I
want
just search
to
Epstein Black Book and not Nick Bryant.
yeah, unless it's been removed from Google, but we
Oh,
definitely
here it is.
there it is.
Oh, brother.
Mm-hmm.
This
Mm-hmm.
shit's real, people. Like, this is who the fuck you're worshiping at the fucking Oscars and
You go.
the Emmys and the Grammys. And these are the fucking people that go to Bohemian Grove and that you're voting for. Oh, they're gonna make a difference. Yeah,
Right.
what are they doing on the fucking island, people? And why do you think they vote the way they do? Because they're on fucking video raping kids.
Right. Why do you think they're trying to get your support with all these other, stories and things, but they're not even using the topic of protecting children to get your vote? They're
No, and
not even,
these aren't just celebrities and politicians. These are like some of the Duke of York,
yeah,
the
these are
Duchess of
people
York.
all over the world, high level people who were there. Now, obviously, we're not sure that everyone on this list
Oh
was,
no, they were just this.
they
They
were
were just
responsible
traveling on
for.
an airplane.
Yeah,
That's
like we played as dumb as we could, as we
oh,
possibly.
Ralph Fiennes. Oh, oh, Voldemort was there, huh? Howard Finkelstein. Jesus Christ, Ferragamo. Fucking Ferragamo shoes. Andrew Feldman.
And you
This
see
is
how under some names there's two ones
Chris Forbes and Zandy
like
Forbes.
sometimes there's like 20 entries or dates beneath these names. So this
Andrew
is what Nick
Fox, Tom
Bryant,
Ford. Jesus
this is
fucking
what Nick,
Christ.
Nick Bryant released over 10 years ago. Now tell me to my face that our current administration needs more time to sift through things that they, by the way, could have sifted through when it was all happening, when they were in power, when this was all happening. It's all coming out now in this like reality TV show style way. Why?
Because it's all a fucking show and they're all involved.
Yeah, I am not entertained. I just hope that your listeners are completely aware that, said specifically, if they wanted to, they would have a long time ago. Now, I stopped thinking someone was going to come save us in 2020 when there was the presidential debates, right? The third debate. By then, there had been a lot of noise on the internet about all these different things and all these theories about what might happen and this man who was going to come on a white horse and save us all and save the children. And I was really watching to see what was going to happen because I was analyzing a lot of things here. Now, in that third debate, when you're live in front of America and the world, allegedly, you have no censorship here. You can say what you want to the world. Even then, the topic of child trafficking was not even mentioned. No sounds with the mouth were made. Now, I knew then and there that was what solidified it in my book because I was already quite convinced, but that was all I needed to see to understand. This is all a show. This is not, no one's coming to save us. That is when I decided to throw my hat in, if you will. That is when I decided against my will that if not me, then who? Because these politicians are too cowardly and corrupt to even make sounds with their mouth about it, to even get votes, just for the sake of getting votes and pretending to care. I'm not even talking about taking action or being effective. I'm talking about sounds with the mouth about a thing that would unite us all, about a cause everyone, red, blue, old, and new, would care about. No, can't even pretend to care. The topic of child trafficking has still never been mentioned on a presidential debate stage. It is not on anybody's website as being a topic of interest when they're running for election. If that's not an answer to all the rhetorical questions, then what is?
I'd love a shot of adrenaline that these guys get when they bust these groups. Like, are you allowed to talk about any of the operations at a high level perspective without divulging too many details?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this, like I'm not one of the tactically trained, door kicker type people who like bust in and rescue kids or whatever. I'm involved a lot with the aftermath, aftercare portion because trauma informed therapy is like a whole thing. So I'm just saying, like I'm not the door kicker, but I know for sure that what every, you know, badass hero type guy has talked about after the fact, 100% of time, these are weak, pathetic cowards. I've been saying that since way before I was more involved like this directly, but 100% of the time, these people though will cry and shit their pants and pee and start vomiting. Like they'll start acting like a weak, pathetic little coward when they're caught, right? But they'll cry and plead for their life and all these things, but they literally start like pissing themselves on the floor.
Good.
So there's different types of responses, of course. Sometimes it's a lot more, involves a lot more tactical pursuit, etc. A lot of times, though, these people will still try to get out with the defense of something about mental health or mistake or not my fault or whatever it is. So the process that's followed has to be very strict because we need everything to hold up in a court of law. So as creative as these heroes would like to get when it comes to handling
They're
people,
not allowed to beat the shit out of them.
yes, if we want it to result in a prosecution, there has to be a very strict process for how this is done. So I'll leave that there, but I also know of a lot of heroes that are doing things in their own time, on their own dime, that need to be done. And
Isn't that awesome?
yeah, I enjoy those fireside chats very
Love
much.
to buy those guys a beer one day.
Right. Yeah. We are all on the same page about there only being one permanent solution to that type of evil. And
Yeah.
there are different realms of evil that will never be reported. So therefore, there's some shadow.
John Deere's got backhoes on sale currently.
We got a lot of wild boars on that ranch too.
Yeah, you gotta, bury parts of them sometimes.
Yeah, depends on the weather. Sometimes.
Yeah, pigs will eat anything. I mean, in the movies, from what I've heard.
Yeah, no, they're vicious. They're in Texas, you don't even need a hunting license to take them down because they destroy so much property, like billions of dollars worth of farmland and property. But they are some aggressive hogs, and yeah, not much is left of their prey. So
Oh yeah, and I mean, you got to do it. Like some of them will take their helicopters out with ARs with like drum mags and just like smoke a whole fucking herd of wild boar running across someone's field because they destroy crops. They're violent with other animals. Like they'll eat your fucking dogs and your cats. Like they're gnarly animals.
yeah, absolutely. Texas hogs are different, but yeah, it's really fulfilling, I would say, to work with these heroes. We also do a lot of again, law enforcement generally doesn't have the training they should have for this type of thing. Now, at the ranch, there's a lot of different types of tactical training that is literally saving lives, increasing survivability. So we do a lot of like research in things like combat and medical care on the battlefield and simulating or recreating these real world scenarios so that people get to train like they are actually in real life. So vehicle mobility and all these different forms of training, it's really cool to watch. And again, all these people that this place brings together, 100% of them are not only already protectors, but they're like, how can I help? How can I do it? You know what I mean?
I
It's
love it.
yeah, it's a really cool thing to be a part of.
Imagine if you could pump a few $1 million or even more into an organization like that and get them all the equipment and the surveillance and the vehicles and the weapons and the drones. And I mean, you could have a nationwide operation.
100%.
Um,
Even
yeah,
just
I mean, I love all that, and I think it's crucial, like to be that high level of an operator. But it would seem to me like these are such soft targets. Like, how often do they fucking kick a door in where anyone knows how to use a gun or anyone's armed or anyone has fucking body armor or any of this shit? Like, these guys seem like the softest targets ever.
well, we're talking about different levels of predators. So like earlier you called them gutter pedophiles, which like when I'm on the internet being a child and there's some pervs coming in saying pervy ass things, those are gutter pedophile, like the unkept, live in their mother's basement types, rat energy, I call them, scum of the earth, like you were talking about earlier. When we're talking about actual rescue operations and stuff, these are the more organized levels of criminals. So again, that can be to varying degrees. It can be
Counter surveillance and that type of
oh yeah,
shit,
lots
like
of that. But
technology and
those,
weapons.
yeah, absolutely. But sometimes those networks can have much more organized counter surveillance and security. So that's when they can absolutely encounter counter fire and things like that. So it can get quite dangerous. Again, that's where higher levels of training and also jurisdiction come in because they do need the larger firepower. Now, again, a lot of times, let's just say this lightly. There are a lot of big cities in America that conceal their true crime statistics because they don't want to diminish tourism. So, for example, if they really reported all the crime that happens on the Las Vegas Strip, they might never see tourists like they see right now. Okay.
Mm.
That applies to a lot of places in America. Now, the great thing about those unreported crimes is that there's more that can be done without media attention to solve those problems. So, sometimes certain places, right? Like South Texas is quite a wild, wild west situation. And be that as it may, like I said, of the pie chart of all the bad things that might be happening, right? There are good guys that are incredibly intolerant, specifically of this slice of the selling children part of this pie. So, some wild, wild west things can sometimes be implemented, but, that's not my realm and I don't ask questions. I just like hearing the stories.
I love the language you're speaking. It's my language. Anyways, Kim, you're amazing. I would love to meet you in person one day. I'd love to go to the ranch and next time I do one of my road trips, if I'm out that way with the podcast or doing a veterans retreat with my machine and everything I do with my book and working with these veterans, I'd love to drop by and meet all you guys.
I'd love that. You're welcome anytime.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. I know you got stuff to do. You're a busy lady, but thank you so much. It's been an honor having you again, and I appreciate this connection. And I look forward to supporting you in any way I can and moving forward as this machine grows and we get it into the VA and active duty bases. And I'm selling a ton of them. There will be a nonprofit, and I guarantee you there's going to be money behind this, so we can really strengthen everything you're working on because it's right in line with my vision and what I'm working on too.
I love that. I love that so much. Thank you. I would definitely love to meet you in person, bring you down to the ranch. Real quick to put a pin in that, we're putting together a lot of different law enforcement training programs, both online so that it can be virtual, as well as in person that combines tactical training with the classroom style education and awareness and stuff. I'm working with some of the, incredible unsung heroes in this industry. It's also something I'm getting funded so that we can make it available for free to law enforcement. So not only will it be all the certifications needed to help them show up, but also to make sure that they don't have to pay for it. So if anyone wants to get involved or, has connections or wants to support that kind of effort, law enforcement wants this training and should have this training. And the better trained they are, the more effective they can be. So something I'm very passionate about as well.
Well, this episode is going to be live on Spotify by this afternoon. I'll be sure to tag you on Instagram, and I would love you to push it out to your entire network. And I would also love to interview anyone in your network on this show anytime.
Oh, cool. Oh, we should do that. Okay, awesome. Let's make that happen.
Awesome. Okay, we'll chat soon.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Have an awesome day.
You too.